thank you for all finishing your conversations now and returning to your... I have decided, apropos of nothing in particular, to move to Clause 31, Dudley Creek options for downstream long-term flood remediation. I think we have a team of people available, ready, willing and available. Cast of thousands. And John, I think you're coming up to the table as well. Pardon? Would you like to make a suggestion, Ray?
In future, we do the important things first off in the morning.
Yes, I agree.
Not late in the afternoon.
Yeah, but the trouble...
every time this happens.
Yes, I know that, but
just a suggestion.
We have the community boards in the morning, and that's always the case. And we do try not to have major papers at the community board meeting, but you know, and I had to organise a set time. Excuse me, I had to organise a set time. I'm not taking umbrage at your implied criticism of my chairmanship. Anyway, but no, you're absolutely right, and we will attempt to do that. But we have to start with the community boards in the morning for their purposes. So, Dudley Creek options for downstream long-term flood remediation. So, since this was last in front of our committee, there's been a substantial amount of community engagement undertaken, and if I'd like to hand over to the... Well, do you want to introduce the paper, or... Okay, well, who would like to introduce the paper? John, would you?
Yeah, okay, I will just kick it off. And thank you, Your Worship, for bringing this forward, and so the team can actually present this large piece of work that's been going for some time. So we're really pleased to be at this point with a comprehensive set of options. We think with a way forward, or a suggested way forward, and we are ready to take any of the questions that might come of this. But rather than doing a page turn of the voluminous appendices that support the report, we've prepared a presentation that the team could walk through. If you'd like to see that now,
yes, that would be lovely.
Which gives you a concise view of what the summary of the report and these appendices. There has been an awful lot of work gone into this, and I think we can give a precise summary by way of PowerPoint.
Yeah, I think that would be good.
So I'd ask Keith and Tom to lead that.
Just before we start, could we get some commentary around the deputation this morning? Because that would be quite interesting in context.
Yeah, well, let's have the presentation, and then we'll have questions. I think we'll deal with it at questions, because I mean he's obviously raised issues that will be shared by some and not others. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
You all set to go?
Yeah. We can have the live overhead.
Get the PowerPoint up. This one here.
Here we go.
Here we go.
Right. Thank you very much. So the question is which route are we recommending? And as it says there, option C. So as you'll recall, option A is the Warden Street Banks Avenue route. So that's a piped and open channel route. The alternative route that was proposed when we met last year is option B, and that's also a piped route, Warden Street down through Marion College and through the red zone. And option C that came up, there was a route that previously had been discounted, but for reasons around related to the red zone and to cost, came back in. Option C, this involves route channel widening on Stapleton's Road and a piped bypass down Petrie Street, Randall Street and Medway. So we'll refer to those three options, A, B and C, as we go through. So what I want to do is just take you quickly through comparing and contrasting those options so that we can understand how we've done the analysis to come to this recommendation of option C. So the first thing is in terms of flood relief. Now, in comparing these options, all of them give equal benefits to the Flockton area, which of course is what these downstream options are all about. The upstream you've already agreed. Now it's about the downstream, and put together, all of them give equal benefits to Flockton area. So there's not really anything between them in that. I've just given reference to option C there, in that there's some secondary benefits that's worth noting, in that Stapleton's Road do receive some additional flood relief of their own by pursuing that option in preference to the other two. The cost estimates are all quite comparable for what are quite different options. Option C is the cheapest, not by far, but still substantial amounts in those absolute terms. The most expensive is option B, and the alternative route for option B, where we found a route around the red zone, because as we go to it, and as perhaps know, Sarah's have difficulty giving consent in a timely fashion for new infrastructure through the red zone, so we came up with this alternative route, but of course that adds to the cost. So 26.2 million against 32.1, these are the construction costs just for the downstream option parts that we're considering today. Deliverability. As we've indicated previously, we're targeting a completion of works on site by winter 2017. We believe this to be the earliest date that we could construct a scheme of this magnitude, and all of them have some degree of risk attached to them. Option B has the highest risk because of the red zone consent, and because of that we're not recommending that option in the direct option B route. Option A, the Banks Avenue route, has a moderate risk. That also requires a red zone consent, although a lesser threshold to gain that, so that's possibly more consentable. But there's also risk of third-party challenge, more so than perhaps option C, which we considered or assessed as a low risk. Possibly the least risky option would be option B, the alternative route. There's far fewer landowners and it avoids red zone. However, there is a risk that a single landowner could block that by not giving negotiated consent, and that could delay the route, that option quite considerably. Resilience and sustainability. Here a lot of work has been done to compare options around this, and we've compared gravity solutions with pumped solutions. And in looking at whole of life, the team have come up with the assessment that a gravity system is quite adequate and has whole of life costs less than pumped, and is therefore recommended and proposed. As part of that assessment, similar to the skirt models, they've worked on an assumption for costing purposes of 2 earthquakes over what would be a century or more of asset life, of 2 earthquakes that would cause damage in order to give some base assessment. What it's felt is that any repairs that would be necessary in terms of whole life cost, is still cheaper to have the gravity system. In terms of future sustainability, all the options are comparable. All of them can be upgraded to different degrees or in different ways to allow for future climate change or sea level rise. So that, again, there's nothing really between them. Environmental impact. This was obviously a big consideration when we've considered this previously and been through consultation. Option A has the most significant impact. Tree loss is greatest. 112 trees would be lost with this option, but our landscape architects also say that this option has the greatest opportunity for environmental enhancement. So there's conflicting drivers in that one. Option B, in contrast, has the least impact, but still 42 trees would be lost. So it's not without impact. Those trees would be replaced on a like-for-like basis, so there's little opportunity for enhancement. It would just be replacement. Option C sits somewhere in the middle with a moderate impact of 70 trees and shrub groups lost. But again, there's opportunity for enhancement from that. Construction impact, another consideration that we consulted on, and again, as was mentioned this morning, option C would be most disruptive to residents during construction. It's a very significant scheme. It's a very large pipe culvert to put in, and we can't get away from the fact that residents would be disrupted. Option Option A, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong one. Option A is moderately disruptive. There would be less impact. It's a shorter pipe length affecting fewer people. Option B, mostly piped, mostly through recreation areas and through Marion College. And so assessment would be that that's the least impact. Public feedback. We went to a very extensive consultation exercise. It's not the first one, so we've been able to combine the results of those to some degree in terms of our understanding. But for this exercise, whilst it wasn't a public vote of the options, we did ask the public to express their preferences and to give us their views. Now, option A, Banks Avenue route, not surprisingly, was least favoured and had the most negative responses. Option B was most favoured by residents, and a lot of the reasons given for that was that that would actually have the least impact on other residents or on the environment, so it was favoured on that basis. Option C, the recommended route, actually had quite a reasonable response. It wasn't too far behind option B. And again, as was mentioned this morning, depending how it's not a straight vote, but there was a significant number of residents, both through their representations and through the one-to-one and drop-in sessions, indicated support or a neutral response to option C. A number of Stapleton's Road residents favoured this option because they felt that they would benefit personally in terms of flood risk reduction and from enhancements that could be made to landscaping. And as we say, there's 20% responded with comments but didn't express a preference on route choice. Now that's the summary of the analysis at the general level. The multi-criteria analysis that we've referenced previously is about trying to balance all those things I've just gone through. And for that, we've given some weighting considerations. The project team decided that more weight should be given to the functionality aspects, the flood reduction, the hydraulic sustainability, the performance, and the environmental impact, with less weight given to cost and construction impact. Now, when we actually then weighed this up with what the residents had responded to in terms of their questionnaires, you can see here there's actually really good correlation. So the residents, slightly different, but again, flood reduction, community health and well-being and environment. So the long-term benefits were seen to have a higher weight than the short-term costs, construction impacts, and the time to complete the work. The feeling that get the right scheme, get the best scheme. And so that's perhaps a view that's been shared by the project team and by residents who've responded. Again, just making the point, the multi-criteria analysis is just a tool to help with the recommendation. So with the team have given weight to each of those, scored each of those considerations, and that's been weighted. And that has given us a recommendation on which are the best route options when comparing them. Option C scored top, but we should note here that option A, the Dudley Creek widening down Banks Avenue, actually was a very close second. Option B, the piped option through Marion College, was trailed quite a way behind. Now this is not considering risk, this is not considering deliverability, this is just about what we believe to be the best scheme. When we added in risks, delivery risks, the scoring changed a little bit. We found that option B, because of risk of deliverability, dropped to the bottom. Option A actually scored a little bit less because there's some risks on deliverability because of red zone consent. And the option B, the alternative route, because it avoids the red zone, came up into second place, but still somewhat behind option C. So option C was felt to be the best route option, and in terms of risk assessment of deliverability, it's held its place as being the recommended route. So that is our recommended proposal to you today.
Very good. Questions. So I've got Phil. Paul, did you have a question, or you want a general response to the
Yeah, I'd just like a general response to
this morning.
Clary's commentary around option B being the better of the options.
No, it can do. But I just didn't want to ignore him because he did have his hand up after Phil. So I'll go Phil, Paul, David, Ali, Pauline.
So, well, one of mine are along the same lines, but first of all, thank you very, very much for such a full report and so heavily indexed. It's excellent. What I wanted to ask you too is about, like, it just seemed to me from the submission we had this morning that it was really claimed that option C would have an impact, particularly on Stapleton's Road residents, and yet in fact in the report, as I pointed out, it really says the opposite. So I'm just wondering if you could clarify that, but also perhaps along the lines that Paul is asking, just were there any ways that in fact the submission this morning could have kind of been added up to make any possible further option, if you get my drift?
Well, perhaps if I can comment, there's perhaps a couple of parts to that. I think what came out from the representation this morning and from a number of those residents who did respond is that they're concerned about impact to residents and to the environment, and it's their risk assessment around the scheme. Now, they're quite valid questions, and the project team have spent a lot of time developing responses to that and through their design. The risks around Stapleton's Road are such that we believe that the modelling work that has been done, the design proposals are solid, are robust. They've been validated by the flood events that happened last year, so we can say that the modelling work that underpins a lot of the design is solid. And as good as you're going to get anyway. So we have every confidence in that. Now, clearly, we've still got a bit of work to do to convince the community that. And I think that in terms of our communication and consultation, the team here have done an absolutely fantastic job, and I'd really commend them on that. But clearly, there's still some parts of the community who are still yet to be convinced. And so I think we do need to do more work on that. But as a project team, we feel very strongly that this is a robust scheme, it's a robust proposal, and will give benefits to those that live on option C, on Stapleton's Road, and that those risks that have been raised will not eventuate.
Yeah, and I think if I could add to that, is that there was a short-term risk identified that in doing the Shirley Road culvert first, and by putting in the larger culvert, taking out the constraint there, would permit greater flows before the works downstream were completed. Now that can be managed, and that will be managed through constraining putting inlet controls on that culvert so that when we do get events, we don't have consequences downstream. In an ideal world, we'd work from the downstream end and work our way up, but because this work was in the SCIRP program, it was critical that we get this thing off the constructed while SCIRP was still in play. And so that work is actually in progress at the moment, due to be finished in February, March next year. But those risks can be managed.
So the kind of like ideas that were, just to clarify for me, the ideas that were sort of put to us this morning by the submitter, and in fact you're not, so far haven't said no to, but is there any way that in fact they could be joined up?
In what
in terms of being workable, they were a bit unclear. But I'm just, in terms of what was presented, is there any way that concept might be able to be achieved?
Certainly, in the future, it's recognised that duplicating the options could be one way forward to mitigate climate change effects. So, if option C is recommended today, sometime in a future date, you may come and construct an alternate bypass route along the lines that was discussed this morning. But to advance that in parallel would conceivably provide additional capacity in the scheme, but that would go beyond what that pre-quake flood risk reduction. It's worth noting that for Stapleton's Road, all options will provide a reduction in flooding along Stapleton's Road. And in fact, for option C, because the bypass starts downstream and we have to achieve a certain benefit at Warden Street, there's a further flood risk reduction along Stapletons Road. So we're looking for about 1/2 metre drop in water level around Warden Street. If option C progresses, there'll be an additional, say, 300 mils or so down at the Petrie Street end. Now that benefit reduces the closer you get to Warden Street because you're getting closer to that point at which your target is. But there are certainly additional benefits in flood risk reduction for Stapletons Road with option C.
So I think that answers your question too, doesn't it? Yeah, okay, so David, Ali, Pauline, Yanni.
Thanks. One of my questions has been asked in the same context.
Good.
Option B, one of the greater impediments, well, the greatest impediment to pursuing option B was a section of that would traverse the red zone land. Do we have any issues with it going on a road through the red zone land? We're still going through the red zone land, but a portion of the road, are we in total control of that, or does Sarah have something to say about?
Bypass.
No, so the alternative route for B, the one that was shown in
I'm sorry, option C, going through the red zone on road through a red zone portion.
No, so Sarah have not submitted a response on that. So being as we're, the red zone is obviously only the land parcels, it doesn't include the road carriageway. So we are able to pipe through the road corridor through the middle of the red zone without requiring red zone consent. And Sarah have been accepting of that and have not submitted in any opposition to that.
Can you put the picture back up in front? It's much easier.
Sorry. Yeah.
Literally in front of us. Yep, thank you.
Yeah, just that small section of roading that goes through through the red zone. So we don't have any issues.
The roads aren't technically red zoned.
Yes.
Thank you. My second question sort of centres around the multi-criteria assessment. It's no secret that I'm a wee bit sceptical about computer modelling and a few things like that. So what assurances, no, I'll back up a wee bit. You are able to give different loadings to various criteria in your multi-criteria analysis. How do we know that the weightings that you are giving are appropriate? I mean, some people will suggest that, this is a suggestion, that you run the multi-criteria analysis until you get the result you want.
Can I answer that? That was the allegation that was made this morning, and we have to defend the process that was followed. It is an objective human analysis. The criteria are ranked based on a comprehensive collaborative team from different disciplines who sit down and look at the weightings and the criteria. They compare those. You saw the slide there that said what are the priorities of the community, and there was good alignment between what the community felt was the most important and the team. So it was good alignment there, and then you give it some objective weighting, and there is a humanistic element to that. So it's based on judgment and experience as well as the feedback from the community. No way do we run that analysis by changing the weightings to get any preconceived result.
That at all, but if we looked at, and I take the point that the public feedback and the multi-criteria analysis were close, but they were close for options A and C. How close were they, and would minor tweaking of that have actually made option A more?
Yeah, and what we can do is run sensitivity around that, and we are more than happy to share the actual scores if that was felt useful.
I
think in response to your point, the scoring is done by consensus, and you're quite right in saying that any changes to those scorings could have an influence on the outcome of the results. Now it's just a tool, and so presented that really given the, we're not basing the recommendation just on the multi-criteria assessment because it is a tool and it with the sensitivities it could change it. I accept that point. A and C did come out quite close in terms of what is the best scheme, and I think what we're saying is that A and C are better than B, but in terms of the deliverability, when we consider the risks, and we don't need the tool to give us scores for that, C is potentially has a lower risk of non-delivery in that time frame than A. And I think that that's when we start to see the separation. So we don't need the tool to tell us that. The tool supports an outcome that we've formed by working this through ourselves.
Thanks. And just lastly then, did you actually do some modelling of the potential effect around the Stapletons Road area? And
Certainly, we've got a hydraulic model for the whole system, which we've been used to size the scheme and come up with the material, the scale and magnitude of works required to achieve the benefits we're looking for. So we do rely on the hydraulic model, and but we also need careful design to support that. So we need to, as the designs progress, we very carefully assess a whole range of risks and do our best to mitigate those risks through the design process.
yeah, look, I'm reasonably familiar with that stretch of Stapletons Road, and one side of the road is substantially higher than the other, or one side of the river, I should, the creek. How many properties, if they talk about, we had that submission this morning that was asserting a possibility of increased risk for some properties. How many properties would actually be at risk if he's right?
Well, there are a number of low-lying properties along Stapletons Road. There are a couple of low-lying houses, particularly on the true right bank, the right side away from the opposite the road.
Yeah.
As you say, they're quite apparent when you drive down there. You can see the houses relative to the creek and relative to the road. Two in particular are lower than the rest. Some of those houses have been rebuilt since the earthquakes and have been rebuilt to the new floor level and floor management areas, so are much higher than what they used to be, so that risk is reduced for floors. The properties themselves are still at risk, and as part of the consultation we went and tried to speak with every resident along opposite the road there, along Stapletons Road, to get their view on the works and understand their acceptability or otherwise of the proposal. And generally those people reported that yes, that creek does flood. It does flood on their properties up to certain levels, some close to their houses, some not close to their houses, depending on the particular property. But they all tended to be very sympathetic and empathetic to the people of Flockton, and were generally favourable for the scheme to progress. So yes, there is flood risk. The scheme will reduce flood risk for those people, and they can see some benefit there.
Thanks. I'd just like to compliment you guys for a very comprehensive report. I think you've covered all the bases very well.
Ali, Pauline?
Thank you. Option A, 118 trees lost. Option B, 42 trees lost, and option C, 70. But there's a mention of enhancement there. So option C, which is preferred, 28 trees are additional to the B option as far as being lost. What is the enhancement?
So the enhancement is a landscape architect designed proposals for those sections. We gave reference to them in the consultation document, so residents had the opportunity to see some of the proposals, what it would look like, both in terms of this.
Oh, sorry, it's visual. I'm aware of that, but
Yeah.
it's visual, it's not...
And ecological.
And ecological. Okay.
Yes, and
Thank you.
we made clear through the drop-in sessions where they got more detailed as well, so they had the opportunity to understand just what we were proposing.
Oh, sorry.